Madam President.
Senator from Kentucky.
If there is a theme that connects the dots in the Middle East, it is that chaos breeds terrorism. What much of the foreign policy elite fail to grasp, though, is that intervention to topple secular dictators has been the prime source of the chaos. From Hussein to Assad to Gaddafi, it's the same history. Intervention topples the secular dictator, chaos ensues, and radical jihadists emerge. The pattern has been repeated time and time again. And yet what we have here is a failure to understand, a failure to reflect on the outcome of our involvement in Arab civil wars. They say nature abhors a vacuum. Radical jihadists have again and again filled the chaotic vacuum of the Middle East. Secular dictators, despots who frankly do terrorize their own people, are replaced by radical jihadists who seek terror not only at home, but abroad. Intervention when both choices are bad is a mistake. Intervention when both sides are evil is a mistake. Intervention that destabilizes the Middle East is a mistake. And yet here we are again, wading into a civil war. I warned a year ago that involving us in Syria's civil war was a mistake, that the inescapable irony is that someday the arms we supply would be used against us or Israel. That day's now. ISIS has grabbed up from the U.S., from the Saudis, from the Qataris, weapons by the truckload. And we are now forced to fight against our own weapons, and this body wants to throw more weapons into the mix. Now, even those of us who have been reluctant to get involved in Middle Eastern wars feel now that American interests are threatened, that our consulate, that our embassy is threatened. And we feel that if ISIS is left to its own devices, that maybe they will fulfill what they have boasted, an attack on our homeland. So yes, we must now defend ourselves from these barbarous jihadists. But let's not compound the problem by arming feckless rebels in Syria who seem to be merely a pit stop for weapons that are really on their way to ISIS. Remember clearly that the president and his Republican allies have been clamoring for over a year for airstrikes against Assad. Assad was our enemy last year. This year, he's our friend. Had all those airstrikes, though, occurred last year in Syria, today ISIS might be in Damascus. Realize that the unintended consequences of involving ourselves in these complicated, 1,000-year-long civil wars leads to unintended consequences. Had we bombed Assad last year, ISIS would be more of a threat this year. ISIS may well be in Damascus had we bombed Assad last year.
The two brothers point to their home. At least it was until the early hours of Tuesday morning. It's the one with the collapsed roof. We were sleeping. We heard the sound of the plane and it fired, Ahmed, the elder of the two, says. They and their family are lucky to have survived. Beneath the rubble, some of their neighbors perished. These are the survivors of the extended Barakat family. We were woken at 3:30 by an explosion so loud it blew my ears out. I opened my eyes and I saw a ball of fire coming down on me from the skies. Muhanna Barakat remembers cradling his wounded son. 2 floors collapsed on top of them, killing 2 of his daughters. One was 14, the other 5. 3 of his children were wounded. In all, he says, 15 civilians were killed. We're told the homes in the village of Kafar Daryan and Idlib were hit during the initial coalition airstrikes. This is video from that night, as residents desperately tried to dig through the rubble. Here, a body is being pulled out. Through Skype, we reached the Syrian activist who filmed the videos, Salah Kojo. He says it was a woman among those killed. Throughout the revolution, we never heard explosions like this, Kojo tells us. The coalition says they are targeting ISIS, but we saw the opposite, he says. The U.S. says it launched airstrikes against ISIS and other terrorist targets that night. So why this residential area, which villagers say is far away from any rebel groups?
If you get The Economist magazine or if you walk by a newsstand, look at this morning. The president, of course, launching airstrikes in Syria in addition to Iraq, speaking to the United Nations this week, telling leaders around the world you have to pick sides and join the United States, he says, in this fight against terrorist groups. An iconic image there. Now we can go back and show what that's based on. That, of course, was George W. Bush when he went on the aircraft carrier with the infamous now mission accomplishment.
Well, you may not like it.
If Article 2 gives unlimited power, why come at all?
Senator, let me just finish it off. Because he believes that the Congress ought to do this. And no one has...
But he doesn't believe he's bound.
The president has the right, as the president under Article 2, to defend this nation.
All right, also in New York City, the governor and the mayor are playing down new concerns about an attack on city subways. Some transit riders in New York and other cities are worried because of a statement from Iraq's new prime minister.
Thousands of Iraqis gather in central Baghdad on Saturday, protesting against American intervention. Demonstrators wave Iraqi flags and pictures of leading Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr, who says the government shouldn't cooperate with U.S. occupiers. Washington has been carrying out strikes to combat Islamic State militants. The anti-U.S. rally comes a day after the United Nations held a meeting on Iraq. Washington, which has been working to build an international coalition aimed at defeating the Islamic State group, says more than 40 countries have offered assistance. Iran has so far rejected requests from the U.S. to hold bilateral talks on fighting the militants. France has become the first country to join the U.S. in airstrikes. The French Air Force launched its first strikes less than 24 hours after the intervention was authorized by President François Hollande. The Islamic State group seized large swathes of territory in both Iraq and neighboring Syria over the summer.
The FBI and the Department of Homeland Security now are out with an intelligence bulletin to local police, alerting police that airstrikes could trigger some kind of retaliation from terrorist sympathizers. The bulletin, which we've seen, says, "We believe these strikes will contribute to homegrown violent extremists' broader grievances about U.S. military intervention in predominantly Muslim lands."